Hello everybody, my name is Sang-Hwa Lee. I'm the professor of Tandong Global University and I'm teaching at the School of Global Entrepreneurship and ICT. Today's topic is 4P mix analysis. Okay. In our class of building business strategy, I first introduced the 5-step process for building business strategy. Where are we right now in 5-step process for building business strategy? We are now at step 4. So first we identify the gap between the target and the current performance, and then we listed strategic alternatives for analysis, and then in step number 3 we did 4 analysis: external and internal analysis, starting from industry analysis, competitor analysis, customer analysis, and core competency analysis. Now it's time for us to choose the best strategic option. So this is the time we make some conclusion, and then to think about some more detailed tactics and strategy for the implementation, for implementing the strategy. Okay. Okay, putting together the results of the 4 analyses, it's time for us to draw the implications on rebalancing the business portfolio. For the exercise of the building the business strategy, I chose a case of rebalancing the business portfolio out of 4 different business sectors. So I also introduced the concept of the BCG matrix, right? BCG matrix is useful in useful in prioritizing where to put more resources on the possible candidates. So we use the 2 different criteria. One is the attractiveness of the market itself, and the second criteria we used was our relative position in that industry. So by using 2x2 matrix of BCG matrix, and we could choose the area, the star area where we can put more resources, and then the dark area we will reduce our investment in those areas. So we used the similar approaches in identifying which businesses to invest out of, for example, the 4 different industries: travel business, shipbuilding business, automobile business, and construction business. So in order for us to decide which one we have to invest more and which one we divest more, we did 4 analyses. So those are the typical analysis in building the business strategies. What was that? The first one was a market analysis, or the industry analysis. The purpose of doing that industry is to identify whether the market is attractive or not. We are not talking about whether the market is specifically attractive to our company, but we are talking in general whether the market is attractive to the existing players or newcomers, so that the newcomers may have an interest in entering such markets. And then the second analysis we have done was the competitor analysis. So for the purpose of that analysis, to find out whether there is a strong competition among the competitors in that market. So if the market, even though the market is attractive, if are a lot of strong competitors, and then it would be a negative sign for our company to expand our business or to enter such industries as a newcomers. So that's why we have to analyze not only the attractiveness of the market, but also the competition among the existing players. And then the third analysis we have done was the customer needs and wants. So we have to analyze the needs of the customers first, and then have some conclusions whether it is easy to satisfy the customer needs or not. In some industries, the customer needs and wants are quite tough and very difficult to satisfy. And in other industries, the expectation of the customers are not that high, so it's quite easier for the existing players to satisfy the needs of the customers quite easily. And finally, the three analyses I have mentioned so far were the external analysis, more or less. So the final analysis we have to do was about the internal analysis, whether we have the core competencies to get competitive advantages. So even though the market, in case the market is so favorable to every players, if we do not have a competitive advantages to attack those positions, and we have to think about investing those areas aggressively. But in case, even though the market was not very favorable and the competition among the existing members are very strong, but if we have core competencies to distinguish ourselves from the competitors, and then we may dare to enter such markets. Okay, so those four analyses are all very important to decide whether we will increase our resources or decrease our resources in those markets. So as I said, we have four different business sectors to invest, or which we have already invested in: travel industry, shipbuilding industry, automobile industry, and construction industry. Those are just the examples of for the purpose of this class. Okay, let's say that in terms of the market attractiveness, the attractive market, the industry that were identified as the attractive market might be travel industry and shipbuilding industry. And based on our analysis, the unattractive market might be automobile industry and construction industry. Okay, and then based on the second analysis of the competitors, if you see that the competitors' trends and the competition among themselves, in travel industry and automobile industry, competition is not that fierce. But in the shipbuilding industry and construction industry, the competition is fierce. And in that case, out of the four different business sectors, travel industry is relatively good industry we may focus on, because the market is attractive and the competition is not that strong among the existing players. But on the contrary, if you see that the construction industry, the market is not attractive and the competition is very fierce, that means it's a red ocean instead of the blue ocean. So we'd rather not invest, or we'd rather decrease our investment in construction industries, right? And also, according to our analysis of the the customers' needs and wants, in the travel and construction industry, it's easier to satisfy the customer needs. Okay, but on the contrary, in shipbuilding industry and automobiles, it is difficult to satisfy the customer needs. So travel industry might be a strong candidate for our the new investment or increasing the existing investment. Okay, and then finally, we did our internal analysis whether we have the relevant core competencies in each of those 4 different sectors. So based on our analysis, in travel and shipbuilding industry, we have the relevant core competencies which might bring the competitive advantages in those industries. And according to our analysis, we do not have relevant core competencies in automobiles and constructions. So based on based on the data from those 4 analyses, if we just put together the results of the 4 analyses, we can easily draw the implications on rebalancing the business portfolio. That means we will increase our investment in travel industries and we will decrease our investment in the construction businesses. Okay. Let me remind you of the previous classes of each of the 4 different analyses we have already covered in the past classes. Okay, the final outcome of the industry analysis might be like that, might be this slide. Okay, so we collected a lot of data about the industry, and first we defined the scope of the industry, and then we collected the data about market characteristics and market dynamics, and finally we decided whether the market is attractive or not. So according to the industry analysis, travel business is attractive, but construction business is not attractive. Okay, if we see that some of the key comments of each of the analysis in terms of the travel industry, which may be attractive, so we can get the data such as although the domestic market is small at around 1 trillion won, it has been growing rapidly at an average of 30% per year over the past 5 years. Operating margin is also high at around 20%. So actually those examples are not from about the travel industry. So if you remember this slide was about the examples of the I think the pet industry in the previous class about the industry analysis, but please don't focus on the specific business sector, but just have a look at the typical comments about market characteristics and dynamics. So our analysis should include the size of the market. Okay, in this case, domestic market is small at around 1 trillion won. And also you have to mention that whether it's a growing market or not. So in this example, it's been growing rapidly at an average of 30% per year, and over the past 5 years. So it's been growing so fast. Especially you are interested in building the business strategy as a founder of the startup. In analyzing the industry attractiveness, you may focus more about the growth rate of the industry instead of the size of the market. Because if the size of the industry is big enough, and then it's so natural that a lot of big players may have an interest in those markets. So in that case, it might be very difficult for a startup to compete with the big existing competitor. So try to find out the niche market, and even though the size of the market is very small at this point, but if it's been growing rapidly, and then that's the area you may have to focus on. Okay. When deciding the market attractiveness, you will have you have to look at the size of the market, growth rate of the market, but also you have to look at the profitability of the business. So in this case, operating margin of the travel business is very high at around 20%. So that's an indication of that the market is so attractive. But on the contrary, if you see that some of the analysis of the construction in the business, which is assessed that it's not attractive very much, the size of the domestic market is 5 trillion won. Okay, it's very big. Okay, that's a good sign that it's better that the big industry, the big market is better for the investment, right? But if you see that the growth rate of the domestic market, the average annual growth rate has remained below 1% over the past 5 years. So that means the industry is not growing so fast, so it's not attractive market. If you see that operating margin, it's very low at around only 3%. So it's also indication that the market is not attractive. Okay, we also have to look at some of the key players in that market as well. So in terms of the travel business, there are no market leaders among 500 small and medium-sized players in the market. So if there is no big leading player, and then it's a good sign for new entrants or small players like us. And in the construction business, if you see that the second bullet point of the bottom box, 2 leading companies dominate the domestic market with 70% market share. So in the market where there are a few big players dominate the market, and then it would be very tough for small players or the newcomers to compete with them. Okay. According to the Michael Porter's 5 forces model, and then we may look at the entry barrier. Okay, so in terms of the travel business, the entry barrier is very high. So that means it's good for the existing players, because newcomers are very difficult to enter into the market, even though the market was so attractive. Okay, and also the players in that market have a strong bargaining power against supplier as well as against the buyers. So if we look at the dynamics of the bargaining power in between supplier or the existing players of the market or the buyers, the players actually have the strong bargaining power against the supplier and the buyer. So that means that if you are a player in that market, the market is so attractive from the existing players' point of view. Okay. On the contrary, in the construction business, the entry barrier is low, so that means even though the market is attractive or growing so fast, a lot of competitors or the new entries will enter this market. So that make the attractive market into the red ocean very quickly. So in case entry barrier is low, and then that's not a good sign for the existing players. And if you see that the bargaining power of the players against the supplier and the buyers, the bargaining power of the existing players are very weak against supplier and the buyer. So that means that's not a good indication of that the market is attractive. Okay, the next point is that what other points? Okay, we have to see. Okay, all the other points are industry dynamics. Okay, what are the main trends of the key players dynamics in how things are happening in those industries. And so based on the analysis, we made a conclusion that travel industry is so attractive because even though the market size is small, it's growing so fast and there's no market leader, so we may be a leader of those market, and the entry barrier is too high for our competitors, and also we may have a strong bargaining power against the supplier and the buyer. And also we have to it's better for us to decrease our investment in construction business, because construction business is not attractive. Why is not attractive? Because it's not growing anymore, and the operating margin is very low, and there are leading players in the market already, and competitions between existing companies are very strong, and the number of companies withdrawing from that industry is increasing rapidly. And also the entry barrier is low, and the bargaining power of the players are weak.